Hey, folks, welcome to LettermenRow.com. I am Jeremy Birmingham. That is Spencer Holbrook. We are back with another episode of The List brought to you by us, LettermenRow.com. Again, so Spencer, we're talking about players that are must-gets in the Ohio State class of 2022. And, we've gone through a number of different positions in this series to this point. And this is our first real circle back to a same position of a kid we already talked about, which was Xavier Wampa. And now we're talking about Bishop Gorman High School, Las Vegas, Nevada, 4-star, number 3 ranked safety in the country, Zion Branch.
Yeah, and you look, but here's the thing, Berm. You look at these two guys and you watch the film and you're like, there's no way they're going to play the same position in college. And so It makes sense that we're going to focus on 2 safeties because Ohio State needs 2 safeties in this class probably. And if they could, or maybe even 3 safeties with Kai Stokes, depending on whether he can play corner or safety. I think he can play corner more. So you look at those 2 guys, Wampa and now Zion Branch, as we're going to touch on for the next 10, 15 minutes. This guy is awesome. I'm really excited to talk about him.
Yeah, and I want to touch. I think that Kai Stokes is a safety, and I think that the point here with Ohio State is that they can fit all 3 safeties into this class of 2022 because they are different body styles. They are different fits in the defense, as we've talked about when Kai Stokes committed. With him, you kind of see him more that slot safety. With Jordan Fuller, getting ahead of myself. The hyperbole with Zion Branch reminds me of Jordan Fuller. With Xavier Wampa, you could see him in that kind of combo safety linebacker bullet type role. And with Zion Branch, I think you have your traditional deep safety who can, play pretty much anywhere. And the thing that I like about him is I've mentioned in the past that I think Ohio State's preference, their ultimate safety player would be Jordan Fuller in Josh Proctor's body, right? And I think that Zion Branch is as close as you get to that in the class of 2022.
Yeah, he's a hard hitter, and he's a guy who will come up and make plays. That's the first thing. You watch his film, you throw it on, and the first thing you notice is how physical he is, how he's not afraid to come up. But when he needs to, he's back, deeper than the deepest. He's playing his position. He's reading his reads. He looks like he's a really cerebral player when he's on the field. So you kind of look at him and say, wow, what Ohio State could do with him, what Kerry Combs could do if they were to land Zion Branch. I think that's what makes him a must get, and that's why we're talking about him right now.
Yeah, when I saw him the first time was out in Arizona at the Battle 7-on-7 out there in February. And I liked watching him and Xavier Wampa side by side. They were not on the same team, but watching them alternatively, you could sort of see exactly how they'd fit together. Wampa is that guy that can really come up and take some shots and maybe – is a little bit more instinctive in reading a play or getting there. But with Zion Branch, what you have is a kid that really understands the defense and is not going to make mistakes. This is a kid that's going to play it smart. He's going to play it safe, but he is explosive as an athlete, really gets, sideline to sideline very well. And the thing that I think of really about him that's different is just, if you look at the size, the 6'2", 195 pounds, it's prototypical. This is not a kid that's going to grow up and get to 225, 230. You're looking at a 6'2", 210, 215 pound safety by the time he's heading off to the NFL in 3 to 4 years. And, when you're talking about the Ohio State secondary, Josh Proctor will be gone. Ronnie Hickman, Bryson Shaw, they're names that have not really made an impact at Ohio State yet. And, they're now in their 3rd and 4th years heading into the program. By the time Zion will be on the field, you don't know if they'd be there. With the young guys that are there, sure, you have Lathan Ransom, but he's on a projection to maybe even be out of here after next year, as good as he was as a freshman. So there's all these little, nuances that make it important for Ohio State to go out and add a 3rd safety in this class. And that's why they still are recruiting Zion Branch as hard as they are Xavier Wampa, even with Kai Stokes committed.
Yeah, and like you said, you watch these guys play and you could see how they fit together in the defense, and it's all kind of puzzle pieces, but it's also positionless. We talk about it every single time, and it's just something we always hit on. And with Zion Branch, you just see a guy who's versatile, who's physical, who's smart, instinctive. Like you said, you see a little bit of that Jordan Fuller in him. He's kind of exactly what Ohio State's looking for when they go out on the trail and try to find that prototypical ideal safety. And I think that's another reason why maybe if he was a guy who was just, was Ohio State caliber, then they would be like, okay, we have Kai Stokes. We're looking at Xavier Wampa. We're still interested in Zion Branch. No, this is a full court press on Zion Branch. This is a must get for them because of how special he is. And I think the comparisons that he draws only further show how special of an athlete he could be and how he could be a guy who's probably, in the running to be a 3-and-done type kind of guy at Ohio State.
Yeah, and his recruitment's been interesting. Early on, it was pretty broadly speculated that he was almost certain to go to USC, and then Ohio State started to creep in there, and then there was talk about it being Ohio State and USC, and now you're starting to see an official visit to Clemson is set, an official visit to Oklahoma is set, official visit to Ohio State is set for the weekend of June 4th. Alabama's in there. He's now saying he's going to make an official visit to Alabama during the season. Like all of a sudden, this has gone from a kid on the West Coast who, you want to win those battles because the Buckeyes want to maintain that gateway to the West Coast, especially at Bishop Gorman, which is one of the most talented high schools in the country. But now it's turning into one of those big mega national battles. And so the spotlight goes on Zion Branch even a little bit more because Ohio State is going to be in a position where he's going to be told by other schools, oh, they've already got Kai Stokes committed. They already have Jaheim Singletary. They already have Jair Brown. They already have Ryan Turner. How many defensive backs are they taking? Are you sure you want to be a part of this? They took 6 last year, blah, blah, blah. And so it's going to be really fascinating to just watch from a recruiting perspective to see how Kerry Combs and Ryan Day are able to tell him, you are different than what we have. You and Xavier Wampa are different than what we have. You guys are different from each other. It's so many cool little layers here. And ultimately, it always comes down to these same handful of schools, it feels like. And so anytime that you go head-to-head with them, it becomes that much more important to win.
And I think it's telling that Ohio State is having him, and we talked about this with the last guy on the list. When you have a guy that you really, really need to put the full court press on, that June 4th weekend, it keeps coming up. But these guys on the list, more times than not, they're going to be the ones visiting that aren't committed on June 4th. And I think that's obviously by design, but Ohio State knows that that's the weekend where they really, really have to do some damage on the recruiting trail and really hammer home that message that they're going to hammer home.
And there's going to be some changes here. I mean, if you look at Zion Branch's 247 Sports timeline, it has an official visit set to Ohio State, has an official visit set to USC, to Oklahoma, to Oregon, to Alabama, and to Clemson. Well, that's 6. One of those is not going to get an official visit, so you don't know who it's going to be. 3 of them are scheduled for inside of the football season. There has been some discussion that maybe his commitment may not, take that long to get to. So I guess there's a little added layer of intrigue there. Does he end up making a decision this summer? I think, Spencer, when you start to look at, as recruiting gets back to somewhat normal here, the rush of kids that are going to, be waiting, and they're like, oh, dude, I've waited this long to finally get somewhere. I'm ready to make things happen. How many of those are going to circle back and be like, you know what, maybe I need more time because now I'm just actually starting my recruitment. And this is where it's important for Ohio State, because as the program of that stature, they got in on Zion Branch very early. This is not we're coming in late and trying to make up ground or trying to convince you that now all of a sudden, because Alabama or Clemson offered, we think you're that good. The Buckeyes were on him very early. Matt Barnes, Kerry Combs, Ryan Day, the entire program is all in on Zion Branch.
Yeah, and you said it there. When you get in early on a guy, that's when that comfort and relationship, the car that we always talk about, that's when that comes into play. And when you have that comfort and that relationship with the player, you trust what you hear from them, they trust what they hear from you, and then you kind of just push all your chips in and hope that everything goes the right way. And I think it's interesting that you say he's got 6 official visits scheduled. One of them's not going to happen. You wonder what the impact of these visits are going to be, but also as Ohio State, you don't want these visits to be so impactful that they rush into a commitment, and then in the fall you got 3 or 4 guys decommit, and then you start to scramble as signing day approaches. And so I'm not saying that's the kind of guy Zion Branch is, and that's not the kind of kid, that's not the kind of program, that he comes from. But at the same time, you have to be kind of cognizant of what's going to happen in June. And I think they're bracing for that. They understand what's at stake in June. And he's a huge part of what they're going to try to get accomplished in the summer, because if they could have him locked up before he even has a chance to get to the Alabamas or to potential visits during the season, that's just icing on the cake for Ohio State.
Yeah, I mean, it's better to play from the lead in this position than it would be to have to play catch up. And there has been real bonds built between Zion Branch and the members of the Ohio State recruiting class of 2022, especially Keon Grays. He's been very involved in helping try to recruit Zion. And so he's going to be in town, like I said, the first weekend of June, that June 4th official visit weekend with, well, I think, 12 of the Ohio State or 11 of the Ohio State commitments. And that's a real opportunity for these guys to all understand. And this is something we've talked about so many times. These people are like me. And that is such an important piece of the puzzle for kids from a high school in Las Vegas who, a big national power like Bishop Gorman. What Zion Branch has to be looking for on these trips is, do I fit in with these guys? Am I the same type of person? And more, that is such a key selling point for Ohio State. And I think for Branch and his family, that is one of those things that they have to check off, because initially, as I said, I think that the idea here was that he was going to end up at USC, and people kind of had Ohio State written off as a long shot. It's my personal opinion that Ohio State is in the front of that right now, from what I've heard from talking to people. Now, a lot of things can change, as you said, because you don't know if someone, after maybe they make 3 visits in June and then decide, okay, I'm ready to commit. And then the season comes around, like, oh crap, I sped into this too much. And then all of a sudden, I'd like to visit Alabama, please, sir. And then people get freaked out. So, you really want the due diligence to be done here, but understand that no matter what happens in June, Ohio State is going to have to recruit the hell out of these players until signing day in late December.
Yeah, and it's not going to stop. Because this recruiting cycle is going to be the one. We always talked about how much the 2021 kids were affected. This class, more than ever and more than any, was affected by this, and you just wonder how it all is going to turn out. But I think Zion Branch is a good place for us to be right now, and a good guy to discuss, because he is the kind of athlete that Ohio State needs in that secondary.
Yeah, and there are residual benefits. His younger brother, Zachariah, is a top receiver prospect in the class of 2023. Zachariah told me earlier this week on lettermenrow.com, if you go check that out on Dotting the I's, that they intend to play college football together. Ohio State is starting to recruit Zachariah now, and he's a really big time receiver prospect, as I said, with a lot of key offers already. And so, as I said, it's about keeping that gateway to the West open and making sure that in an area that is now becoming more and more talent rich every single year in the West Coast, and between Phoenix, between Vegas, between LA, and other parts of California that Ohio State is trying to get involved in, you really need to have those representatives from that region in your class, because you can't just rely on the Midwest and Ohio at this point, and the Buckeyes know that. And so what you're doing is trying to go out and get the best of the best from everywhere in the country. And Zion Branch is 100% one of the best in the country at the safety position in the class of 2022. And that's why he's on the list from lettermenrow.com. That's where we're going to wrap it up. I'm Jeremy Birmingham. That's Spencer Holbrook. Thanks for watching, folks.